The words echoed in Susan Reyes's mind like a cruel joke as she sat motionless on the ivory sofa, still wearing the red silk dress Marcello had bought her last week. The penthouse stretched around her in shadowed luxury, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city, marble floors cold beneath her bare feet, everything exactly as it had been 3 hours ago. Everything except her. She should respond. Should move. Should do something other than stare at the wine glass trembling in her hand, watching the Bordeaux shimmer under the chandelier's light. "You're safe now." That's what Edmondo had said when he'd arrived at the door, Marcello's most trusted capo, concern etched across his weathered face. "The boss sent me to check on you. There's been complications with the Santoro operation. He wanted to make sure you're safe." She'd believed him. God help her, she'd let him inside. If you believe that even mafia bosses deserve a chance at love, subscribe and like the story to show you agree. The lock clicked, not the gentle turn of a key, but the aggressive shoulder slam of someone too exhausted to care about finesse. Susan's entire body went rigid. Marcello Romano filled the doorway like a storm given human form. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, spotted with what might have been wine or might have been something worse. His black hair, usually immaculate, fell across his forehead. Victory radiated from him in waves, the successful operation written in every confident line of his powerful frame, in the way his golden eyes swept his domain with proprietary satisfaction. He was home early, triumphant, untouchable, still believing his world was exactly as he'd left it. "Mia cara." His voice was warm, rough with fatigue and relief. "I told you I'd be back before sunrise." The Santoros folded faster than he stopped. Really looked at her. Susan watched him notice. The wine glass she'd been holding for an hour, her bare feet when she always wore the slippers he'd bought her, the way she sat perfectly still like a porcelain doll someone had placed on the sofa and forgotten. The way she couldn't meet his eyes. "Susan." Marcello crossed the room in 3 strides, all that victory draining from his expression. He crouched before her, reaching for her hand. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "Did someone?" She flinched. Actually flinched from his touch. The man who'd never seen her afraid of him froze, his hands suspended in the air between them. In that moment, Susan saw something crack behind his eyes, some fundamental belief about his power, his control, his ability to protect what was his. "Cara, talk to me." His voice dropped to that dangerous softness, the tone he used before decisions were made. "Who is here?" The words came out hollow, factual, devastating. "You couldn't save me from the capo." The silence that followed was absolute. A void where the world should be. Marcello's face transformed. The exhaustion vanished, burned away by something primal and terrifying. His jaw clenched so tight she heard his teeth grind. The hand that had been reaching for her comfort curled into a fist, knuckles white, shaking with the effort of restraint. "Edmondo." Not a question. A death sentence. Susan finally met his eyes and saw her mafia boss, her protector, her captor, her future, reduced to one single, bone-deep, blinding truth. He had failed her, and someone inside his own family had destroyed the one thing he'd sworn was sacred. "Where is he?" Marcello's voice came out barely human, scraped raw from somewhere deep in his chest. "I don't know." Susan's fingers tightened around the wine glass. "He left 2 hours ago. Said he had to get back before you returned." Said, her voice cracked. "Said you'd never believe me anyway." Marcello stood abruptly, the movement so violent it made her jump. He turned away, one hand going to his hair, gripping it hard enough to hurt. She watched his shoulders rise and fall with breaths that seemed too controlled, too measured, like he was physically restraining something monstrous inside him. He came to the door. Susan heard herself speaking, detached, clinical. "He said you sent him. That there were complications. That you wanted him to check on me, make sure I was safe while you finished the operation." A bitter laugh escaped her throat. "I believed him, Marcello. He's your capo. Your right hand. Why wouldn't I believe him?" Marcello spun back to face her, and Susan almost recoiled from what she saw. This wasn't the man who brought her breakfast in bed, who kissed her forehead and promised her the world. This was the boss, The man whose name made grown men cross themselves, whose reputation was built on calculated brutality and absolute dominance. Did he touch you? Each word dropped like a stone into still water. Susan looked down at her hands. At the wine she hadn't drunk. At the dress that suddenly felt too tight, too red, too much like a gift from a man who'd promised her safety in a world where safety didn't exist. He said I was wasted on you. Her voice was barely a whisper. Said you kept me locked up here like a pretty bird in a cage, that you didn't appreciate what you had. That someone should show me what real passion felt like. She forced herself to meet Marcello's eyes. He said you'd never know. That you trusted him with everything, your operations, your money, your territory. Why not your woman? The wine glass in Marcello's mind, the one he'd been planning to pour, to toast their future with, shattered against the wall. Susan didn't even see him move. I'm going to kill him. Marcello's voice was eerily calm now, the rage compressed into something cold and surgical. Not quickly. Not clean. I'm going to make him understand what he's done, make him feel every second of regret before he planned it. Susan cut him off, and something in her tone made Marcello go still. The operation tonight. He knew about it weeks ago. He volunteered to stay behind, to coordinate communications. He made sure you'd be gone long enough. Marcello stared at her, and she watched the implications cascade through his mind. This wasn't opportunistic. This wasn't a moment of weakness or impulse. This was calculated, premeditated. A deliberate violation of the one sacred promise Marcello had made, that Susan would be untouchable, protected, his. The penthouse security, he has your codes, Susan said quietly. Your trust. He walked right through every protection you put in place for me, Marcello. Because those protections were never meant to keep out your own family. Marcello closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, Susan saw something she'd never seen before. Helplessness. Raw, devastating helplessness in a man who'd built an empire on the illusion of absolute control. Kara, his voice broke on the word. Don't. Susan set down the wine glass with trembling hands. Don't call me that. Don't promise me anything. You already promised me safety, remember? You promised me that in your world, under your protection, I'd never have to be afraid. She stood, her legs barely supporting her. You couldn't save me from the Capo, Marcello. The one man you trusted most is the one who destroyed me. The penthouse, so carefully constructed as her gilded cage of safety, had become the scene of the ultimate betrayal. And Marcello Romano, the man who controlled an empire, couldn't take it back. He could only stand there, victorious from his operation, covered in his enemy's defeat, and face the truth. He'd won the war outside these walls and lost everything that mattered within them. Marcello remembered the exact moment he'd made the promise. 6 months ago, in this same penthouse, with Susan trembling in his arms after witnessing her first taste of his world's violence. A rival family had sent a message, a severed hand left at the building's entrance. She'd seen it before his men could shield her, and the horror in her eyes had cut deeper than any blade. I can't do this, she'd whispered against his chest. I can't live in a world where people do these things, where you do these things. He should have let her go. Should have sent her back to her quiet life, her bookstore job, her innocence. But Marcello Romano had never been good at denying himself what he wanted, and he wanted Susan Reyes with a hunger that defied reason. Then you won't, he'd said, tilting her chin up to meet his eyes. You'll live here, above it all. Untouchable. I'll handle the darkness, Kara. You'll never have to see it, never have to fear it. In this penthouse, you're safe. Sacred. I swear it on my life, on my family's name, on everything I am, no one will ever touch you. No one will ever make you afraid. She'd believed him. God, she'd actually believed him. Now Marcello stood at the window, staring at the city he controlled, the empire he'd built on blood and fear and absolute dominance, and understood that he'd promised her the one thing he couldn't guarantee. He'd sworn to protect her from his world while keeping her trapped inside it. He knocked at 8:30. Susan's voice came from behind him, flat and distant. Right when you called to say the operation was taking longer than expected. Marcello's jaw tightened. That call. He'd made it from the Santoro warehouse, surrounded by his soldiers, flush with the victory of breaking the rival family's supply chain. He'd heard the anxiety in Susan's voice and assured her he'd be home by midnight. Told her not to worry. Told her she was safe. I was reading, Susan continued, her words mechanical, like she was reciting facts for a police report. That novel you bought me last week. I had the wine you left out. The good Bordeaux you said was for celebrating your return. I was wearing this dress because her voice wavered. Because I wanted to look beautiful for you when you came home. Marcello's reflection in the window showed a man carved from stone, but inside, something vital was hemorrhaging. He'd left her like a wrapped gift for a monster to unwrap. When I opened the door, Edmondo looked concerned. Worried, even. He had that expression he gets during family meetings, when something's gone wrong and he's trying to manage the situation. Susan's footsteps were soft on the marble floor. He said, "Susan, thank God. I've been trying to reach you. The boss wanted me to check in, make sure you're secure. There's been complications with the Santoros, potential retaliation." Every word was a knife between Marcello's ribs. I told him I was fine, that the building security was active, that I didn't need Susan's breath hitched. But he was already inside. He said it would only take a minute, that he just needed to verify the penthouse protocols, that Marcello would be furious if anything happened to me on his watch. Marcello could picture it perfectly. Edmondo's weathered face, that paternal authority he wielded so effectively. The capo who'd been at Marcello's side for 8 years, who'd sworn loyalty with blood and tradition, who'd earned trust through 100 operations and 1,000 small faithfulnesses. The man who'd been waiting for exactly this opportunity. He checked the windows, Susan said. Tested the locks. Examined the security panel. He was so thorough, so professional. He asked if I'd eaten, if I needed anything. He even commented on the book I was reading, said his daughter loved that author. A hollow laugh escaped her. He made me feel silly for being nervous about letting him in. Made me feel like a paranoid child. Marcello's hands curled into fists against the window glass. The methodology of it. The careful construction of normalcy, of concern, of trustworthiness. Edmondo hadn't forced his way in. He'd been invited, welcomed, trusted. Then he poured himself wine. Susan's voice dropped lower. Said he'd wait until you called again, just to be safe. That the complications with the Santoros were worse than you'd let on, that you were protecting me from the details. That you'd asked him specifically to stay with me until you returned. Marcello closed his eyes. Every word out of Edmondo's mouth had been a carefully crafted lie, each one using Marcello's own protective instincts as camouflage. The capo had weaponized the very promises Marcello had made. He asked about us, Susan continued, and Marcello heard her move to the sofa, the leather creaking as she sat. About our relationship. Whether I was happy locked away up here. Whether I ever felt lonely, isolated from the real world. He said, her voice cracked. He said it must be hard, being engaged to a man who's married to his empire. That you loved your power more than anything, even me. That's not true. Marcello turned from the window, the words ripped from somewhere primal. Susan, you know that's not do I. Her eyes met his, and they were hollow. You left me alone in this cage you built, Marcello. You surrounded me with security systems and armed guards and bulletproof glass, and then you went off to your war. You protected me from strangers, from rivals, from the whole violent world out there. She gestured toward the window. But you never thought to protect me from your own family. The accusation landed like a physical blow. Edmondo sat beside me on the sofa, Susan said quietly. He told me I deserved better. That I was wasted on a man who kept me like a possession, locked away and untouched. He said someone should show me what real desire looked like, what it felt like to be wanted instead of hoarded. Marcello's vision went red at the edges. I told him to leave. Susan's hands twisted in her lap. I stood up, told him he was out of line, that I was going to call you immediately. That's when his expression changed. When the concerned, paternal mask fell away and I saw what was underneath. She looked up at Marcello. He said, call him. Tell him his most trusted capo is here with his untouched virgin. See if he believes you. See if he chooses you over the stability I bring to his organization. The words hung in the air like poison. He knew Marcello. Susan's voice was barely a whisper. He knew exactly how much you needed him. Knew that his network, his connections, his power in the family made him untouchable. He knew I was the only thing you valued more than your empire, and he bet everything that I wasn't worth enough. Marcello crossed the room in 3 strides, dropping to his knees before her. You are worth everything. Everything, Susan. My empire, my life, my soul. Then why am I still sitting here destroyed? She asked, and the simple question shattered him. Why did your promise mean nothing when it mattered most? Marcello had no answer. No justification. No defense against the truth that his carefully constructed protection had been an illusion, and the man he'd trusted most had exploited every crack in that illusion. He'd failed her. Completely. Absolutely. And Edmondo Giordano was going to learn exactly what that failure cost. Marcello left Susan in the penthouse at 4 in the morning, when the city was still dark and the predators were heading home. He kissed her forehead. She didn't pull away, but she didn't lean in either, and promised he'd be back by noon. She'd nodded, her eyes focused somewhere past his shoulder, already retreating to that hollow place where she'd been living since Edmondo destroyed her. He took the private elevator down to the sub-basement parking garage, where the real business of his empire happened. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as his footsteps echoed on concrete. At this hour, the only people here were the ones who never slept, the enforcers, the watchers, the men who kept the Romano family's heart beating through the darkest hours. Luca Moretti leaned against a black SUV, smoking a cigarette despite the no-smoking signs plastered on every column. His scarred face looked up at Marcello's approach, and whatever he saw there made him drop the cigarette and crush it under his boot. Boss. Luca straightened. Thought you'd still be celebrating the Santoro victory. Call Dante and Riva. Marcello's voice was flat, controlled. I need them here in 20 minutes. Not the usual meeting room. The South Storage Unit. Luca's eyes narrowed. The South Storage Unit was where they took people who needed to disappear. Using it for a meeting meant whatever was about to happen existed outside the normal chain of command. Should I inform the Capo? Luca asked carefully. Especially not the Capo. Something shifted in Luca's expression, not quite understanding, but recognition that the world had just tilted on its axis. He pulled out his phone without another word. Marcello walked through the garage to the South Storage Unit, unlocking it with a key only 3 people possessed. Inside was emptiness, concrete floor, metal walls, a single table with 4 chairs. No windows. No security cameras. No record that anything said here ever happened. He sat in the darkness and waited. Dante Russo arrived first, his massive frame filling the doorway. The enforcer had been with Marcello since the beginning, since before the Empire, when it was just 2 kids from the same neighborhood deciding they'd rather take the world than let it take them. Mark. Dante never called him boss in private. What's wrong? Wait for the others. Riva Castellano appeared 10 minutes later, her sharp features alert despite the hour. She was Marcello's intelligence officer, the woman who knew every secret, every debt, every weakness in the Romano family's network. If something was happening in his organization, Riva knew about it before Marcello did. Almost everything. Luca entered last, closing the door behind him with a decisive click. 3 people. The only ones Marcello trusted absolutely. The only ones who'd never gone through Edmondo's careful vetting process, because they'd been his before Edmondo ever existed in his world. What I'm about to tell you stays in this room, Marcello said quietly. No reports. No records. No communications that can be traced or intercepted. If anyone asks what we discussed here, we were planning a secondary operation against the Santoro remnants. Understood. 3 nods. 3 faces going carefully neutral. Edmondo Giordano betrayed me. Marcello let the words sit in the air like a bomb. Last night, while I was handling the Santoro operation, he went to my penthouse. Told Susan I'd sent him to check on her security. Then his voice hardened to steel. He violated the one promise I've ever held sacred. Dante's jaw clenched. Riva's eyes went cold and calculating. Luca's hand moved instinctively toward the gun at his hip. I want him dead, Marcello continued. But I need to understand the situation first. Edmondo's been building his network for 8 years. He has connections throughout the family, alliances I might not even know about. If I move against him directly, I need to know who moves with him. He's the capo, Riva said carefully. His removal will destabilize the entire command structure. Half the soldados report directly to him. The dock operations, the trade routes, the political connections, they all run through his people. I don't care. Marcello's voice was absolute. He touched what's mine. He planned it, executed it, and did it knowing exactly what he was doing. There's no calculation that makes him survive this. I'm not saying don't kill him, Riva clarified. I'm saying we need to do it right. If Edmondo thinks you're coming for him, he'll move first. He'll call in favors, activate his network, maybe even reach out to the other families. Tell them you're becoming unstable, that your obsession with your woman is making you weak, that he's the steady hand the Romano family needs. Marcello hadn't considered that angle, but of course Edmondo would have. The capo was a strategist, a long-term planner. He wouldn't have made his move against Susan without an exit strategy. What do we know about his movements? Marcello asked. Riva pulled out a tablet she'd apparently thought to bring. He left your building at 9:47 last night. Building security footage shows him in the elevator, looking calm. Satisfied. He went to his apartment in the Marina district, stayed there for 3 hours, then headed to the docks around 1 a.m. Why the docks? Dante rumbled. Meeting with the Genovese family representatives. The ones handling the new shipping arrangement we negotiated last month. Riva's fingers moved across the screen. According to the schedule, you were supposed to attend that meeting, boss. But you were occupied with the Santoro operation. The pieces clicked together in Marcello's mind. Edmondo had known about the Santoro operation for weeks, had helped plan it, in fact. Had encouraged Marcello to handle it personally, to make a statement. Had volunteered to manage the secondary operations and communications. Had made absolutely certain Marcello would be nowhere near Susan. And then had positioned himself as the Romano family's representative at a crucial meeting with their allies, demonstrating his indispensability. He's protecting himself, Marcello said quietly. Building evidence that he's essential to the family's operations. Making it harder for me to move against him without looking irrational. He's also watching, Luca added. Boss, if he planned this, he's tracking your response. He'll have people monitoring your movements, your communications. He needs to know if Susan told you. Marcello stood, pacing the small space. Edmondo was smart, careful, strategic. But he'd made one critical miscalculation. He'd assumed Marcello would choose the empire over Susan. Would swallow the violation to maintain stability. Would be the pragmatic boss instead of the destroyed man. I need surveillance on Edmondo, Marcello said. But it has to be invisible. He can't know we're watching. Riva, use people outside our normal network, contractors, freelancers, anyone Edmondo wouldn't recognize as ours. I want to know everywhere he goes, everyone he talks to, every move he makes. Looking for what specifically? Proof of conspiracy. If he planned this operation, he didn't do it alone. He had to coordinate timing, ensure I'd be away long enough, guarantee no interruptions at the penthouse. Someone helped him. I want to know who. Dante cracked his knuckles. And when we find them, we isolate them. Quietly. One by one. We cut Edmondo off from his support system without him realizing it's happening. By the time I'm ready to move against him, he'll be alone. Marcello met each of their eyes. But this stays between us. No one else in the family can know. As far as anyone's concerned, everything is normal. The Santoro operation was a success. I'm planning the next moves, and Edmondo is still my trusted capo. What about Susan? Riva asked gently. People will notice if she's not seen. If she's not okay. Marcello's expression hardened. Susan stays in the penthouse under guard, my personal guard, not family soldiers. No one gets access to her except the three of you. If anyone asks, she's recovering from a migraine. If they push, they deal with me. The three of them nodded. They understood. In Marcello's world, Susan existed in a separate category from everything else. She wasn't business. She wasn't strategy. She was the line that, once crossed, ended all other considerations. Edmondo had crossed that line. Now Marcello just needed to make sure the Capo's death wouldn't bring down the empire before justice was served. "Get started," Marcello said. "I want the first surveillance reports by tonight. And remember, Edmondo's watching. We give him nothing to see." What would you do if you had to choose between immediate revenge and strategic justice? Drop your thoughts below and subscribe for what happens next. Marcello returned to the penthouse at 11, an hour earlier than promised. He found Susan exactly where he'd left her, curled on the ivory sofa, staring at nothing. The red silk dress had been replaced by one of his shirts, the sleeves swallowing her hands. She looked smaller somehow, like something vital had been carved out of her. Dr. Alessandra Vero stood near the windows, her medical bag open on the marble counter. She turned when Marcello entered, her expression professionally neutral in a way that made his jaw tighten. "I didn't call you," Marcello said quietly. "Luca did." Dr. Vero had been the Romano family's physician for 15 years, discreet and competent. He said there was a situation that required medical attention. Marcello's eyes cut to Susan. She hadn't moved, hadn't even acknowledged his arrival. "I've prepared a sedative," Dr. Vero continued, gesturing to a syringe on the counter. "Something to help her rest. Given the trauma, sleep would be no." The word came from Susan. Soft, but absolute. Dr. Vero paused. "Miss Reyes, I understand this is difficult, but in cases of severe emotional distress, rest is essential for." I said no. Susan's voice was stronger now. She turned her head, meeting Marcello's eyes for the first time since he'd left. "I don't want to sleep. I don't want to forget. I don't want to be managed like one of your problems that needs to be sedated and stored away until it's convenient." Something flickered in Marcello's chest, a spark of the fire he'd fallen in love with, the defiance that had made Susan refuse to be intimidated by him even when common sense said she should be terrified. "Leave us," Marcello said to Dr. Vero. The physician looked between them, then carefully packed her unused syringe. "If you change your mind, she won't." Marcello held the door open. "Thank you for coming." When they were alone, Susan uncurled from the sofa. She moved to the windows, arms wrapped around herself, staring down at the city that was waking up to another ordinary day. For them, nothing was ordinary anymore. "Luca had no right to call a doctor," Susan said. "I'm not sick. I'm not broken. Her voice caught. "I'm angry, Marcello. I'm furious. And if you try to make me sleep through that, if you try to dull it or manage it or fix it, I swear I won't." Marcello stayed where he was, giving her space. "Susan, I would never." "You would." She turned to face him. "You'd do it because you think you're protecting me. Because in your world, problems get handled quietly. Damage gets contained. But I'm not damage, and I'm not going to disappear into medicated oblivion while you handle this behind closed doors." The strength in her voice was undercut by the tremor in her hands, but Marcello heard what she was really saying. She was choosing to stay present, to stay in the pain, because unconsciousness felt too much like surrender. "What do you need?" he asked quietly. "I need you to listen." Susan moved back to the sofa, sitting on the edge like she might bolt at any moment. "Really listen. Because there are things about last night that matter, details that prove this wasn't some impulse or moment of weakness." Marcello sat across from her, every muscle tense. "Tell me." Susan's fingers twisted in the hem of his shirt. "When Edmondo poured the wine, he chose the Bordeaux. The specific bottle you'd left out for us. He commented on it, said, the '09 Chateau Margaux." Marcello always did have excellent taste in the things he collects. Her eyes met his. "The way he said collects, Marcello. Like I was another expensive acquisition. Like he knew exactly how you saw me." The observation cut deep because there was truth in it. Marcello had collected Susan, in a way, plucked her from her ordinary life and placed her in his extraordinary one, surrounded by luxury and protection and isolation. Then his phone rang, Susan continued. He apologized, said it was family business, asked if I minded if he took it. I said of course not. She laughed bitterly. I was still trying to be polite to the man who was about to destroy me. What did he say? Marcello's voice was carefully controlled. He walked to the windows, but I could hear him. He said, everything's on schedule. The boss is occupied for at least 3 more hours. Yes, I'm in position. Then he listened for a moment and said, don't worry. By the time he realizes what's happened, it'll be too late to matter. Marcello's hands curled into fists. The phrasing in position, on schedule, that was operational language. Military precision. Edmondo hadn't come to the penthouse on impulse. He'd been following a timeline, coordinating with someone else. I didn't understand then, Susan said. I thought he was talking about some family business, some operation you were running together. It didn't occur to me that I was the operation. Who was he talking to? Marcello asked. I don't know. But after he hung up, he turned back to me and his whole demeanor changed. He wasn't the concerned Capo anymore. He was Susan's breath shuddered. He was confident. Entitled. Like he'd just received confirmation that he had permission. Marcello stood, pacing to the windows. Someone had been coordinating with Edmondo. Someone had confirmed the timing, given him the green light. This wasn't a lone wolf operation. This was conspiracy. There's more, Susan said quietly. When I told him to leave, when I said I was going to call you, he smiled. Actually smiled. And he said, Susan, do you really think Marcello doesn't know I'm here? Who do you think suggested I check on you personally? The words landed like a physical blow. He wanted me to believe you'd sent him, Susan continued. Wanted me to think that you knew, that you'd approved, that maybe this was some test or game between men in your world. He said, the boss and I have an understanding. We share everything, territory, profits, power. Why would his woman be any different? Rage flooded Marcello's system, so intense it was almost blinding. Edmondo had tried to make Susan believe that Marcello was complicit. Had tried to destroy not just her safety, but her faith in the one person she was supposed to trust absolutely. I knew it wasn't true, Susan said, and her voice cracked. Even terrified, even when he was, I knew you hadn't sent him. But Marcello, he was so convincing. He had answers for everything. He knew your schedule, your codes, your promises to me. He knew exactly what to say to make himself seem legitimate. Marcello turned back to her. How did you make him leave? I didn't. Susan's expression hardened. He left on his own. At exactly 11:15, his phone buzzed. He checked it, and whatever he saw made him stop. He told me that our time was up, that you'd be wrapping up the Santoro operation soon, that he needed to be elsewhere when you called to check in. She met Marcello's eyes. He kissed my forehead before he left. Said, thank you for a lovely evening, Susan. We should do this again sometime. The casualness of it. The arrogance. The assumption that he'd get away with it, that there would be a next time. Then he walked out like nothing had happened, Susan finished. Like he'd just completed a business transaction. I heard him whistling in the hallway. Marcello absorbed every detail, his mind cataloging evidence. The coordinated phone call. The specific timeline. The confidence that he'd be elsewhere when Edmondo left. Someone had been monitoring Marcello's location, feeding Edmondo updates, ensuring the window of opportunity stayed open. Why are you telling me this now? Marcello asked. Why not last night when I first came home? Susan stood, and for the first time since his return, she moved toward him instead of away. She stopped just close enough that he could see the steel forming behind the trauma in her eyes. Because last night I was a victim, she said quietly. I was destroyed, shattered, everything you're afraid I'd become if I really saw your world. But I've been sitting here for hours, and I realized something. Her chin lifted. I'm not going to let him win by disappearing. I'm not going to let you sedate me or hide me or manage me. If you're going to go after Edmondo, I'm going to help you destroy him. Marcello stared at her, seeing the transformation happening in real time. The frightened girl was becoming something harder, sharper, forged in the fire of violation and rage. Susan, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Her voice was absolute. He used me to hurt you. Used my trust, my innocence, my place in your life as a weapon. So I'm going to use what I know to bury him. Every detail, every word, every moment of last night, it's evidence. And I'm going to make sure you have everything you need to make him pay. Marcello reached for her hand, and this time, she let him take it. Then tell me everything, he said quietly. Every single detail. We're going to use it all. The emergency meeting was called for 2 p.m. at the old Romano estate, the sprawling villa where Marcello's father had built the empire and where the family's council still gathered when matters were too sensitive for public venues. Marcello arrived precisely on time, his Maserati pulling through iron gates that had witnessed 50 years of bloodshed and power plays. He'd chosen his appearance carefully tailored black suit, white shirt, platinum cufflinks. Every inch the composed boss, fresh off a victory against the Santoros. Nothing in his expression suggested that his world had fractured 36 hours ago. Dante opened the car door, leaning in close. Riva says the room's already buzzing. Word got out that you pulled an all-night session in the garage. People are speculating. Let them speculate, Marcello said quietly. Speculation is useful. Certainty is dangerous. The villa's great room was filled with the family's inner circle, 15 men and 3 women, who represented the Romano Empire's core power structure. Conversation stopped when Marcello entered. He felt their eyes tracking him, searching for cracks in his armor, weakness they could exploit or protect against depending on their loyalties. Edmondo Giordano stood near the fireplace, perfectly at ease. He was dressed in his usual understated elegance, charcoal suit, no tie, the seasoned capo who'd earned his position through decades of service. When he saw Marcello, he raised his wine glass slightly, a gesture of respect and camaraderie. Marcello returned the gesture with a slight nod, his expression revealing nothing. Marcello. Don Vittorio Romano rose from the head of the table, Marcello's uncle and the family's eldest counsel. At 73, Vittorio had survived 3 wars and countless betrayals. His instincts for power dynamics were legendary. Congratulations on the Santoro operation. A masterful execution. Thank you, Uncle. Marcello took his seat at Vittorio's right hand, the position of the active boss. The Santoros won't trouble us again. Their supply chains are ours, their territory absorbed. We're stronger than we were a week ago. Murmurs of approval circulated the table. This was the language they understood: territory, power, expansion. Marcello the Conqueror, delivering victories that kept them all wealthy and relevant. Yet I hear you've been somewhat occupied since your return, Vittorio said carefully. Luca mentioned you spent considerable time in private meetings. Strategic planning for our next moves. The question was a test. Vittorio was asking if there was something the family needed to know, something that might affect their collective security. Consolidating the gains, Marcello said smoothly. The Santoro collapse creates opportunities, but also vulnerabilities. I wanted to ensure our flanks were protected before we began integrating their operations. It was a perfect answer, strategic, cautious, exactly what a good boss should be doing. But Marcello watched Edmondo from the corner of his eye. The capo's expression remained neutral, but there was the slightest tension in his shoulders. He was wondering if Marcello knew. If Susan had told him. And Susan. This question came from Rosa Benedetti, the family's financial controller and one of the few people who'd met Marcello's fiancée. I'd hoped to see her at the victory celebration tonight. She must be so proud. Marcello's expression didn't flicker. Susan's recovering from a severe migraine. The stress of my absence during the operation took its toll. She sends her regrets. It was plausible. Everyone knew Susan wasn't built for their world, that she struggled with the violence and uncertainty. A stress-induced migraine was exactly the kind of weakness they'd expect from her. Perhaps she needs stronger constitution for the life you're offering her, Edmondo said, his tone sympathetic but laced with subtle criticism. The wife of a boss can't afford to be fragile. There are expectations, responsibilities. The implication was clear: Susan was a liability. A weakness in Marcello's armor. Marcello met Edmondo's eyes across the table. Susan is exactly as strong as she needs to be. Her constitution is not the family's concern. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. It was a subtle rebuke, a reminder that Marcello's personal life existed outside the family's authority. Edmondo raised his hands in mock surrender. Of course, boss. I meant no disrespect. I only worry about the pressures on you both. Vittorio cleared his throat, redirecting the conversation. Which brings us to the purpose of this meeting. We need to discuss the integration of the Santoro assets, but first, he turned to Edmondo. There's been some concern about irregularities in the dock operations. Missing shipments, unexplained delays. You've been managing that territory. What's the situation? Marcello watched Edmondo's micro-expressions carefully. The capo's eyes narrowed slightly before his professional mask slid back into place. Minor complications with the new customs arrangements, Edmondo said. Nothing that affects our bottom line. I've been personally overseeing the corrections. Personally? Vittorio's tone was sharp. A capo's job is to delegate, Edmondo. If you're handling dock-level problems yourself, either your subordinates are incompetent or there's a larger issue you're not sharing. The criticism was pointed. In the Romano family, micromanagement suggested either paranoia or conspiracy, neither of which inspired confidence. I prefer to ensure quality control on sensitive operations, Edmondo said, but there was a defensive edge to his voice now. Vittorio leaned back in his chair, his calculating gaze moving between Edmondo and Marcello. I've also heard rumors that you've been meeting with the Genovese family representatives without proper authorization. Taking meetings that should go through the boss. Marcello felt the shift in the room's energy. This was news to him. Vittorio had independent intelligence that Edmondo was operating outside proper channels. The meeting 2 nights ago was scheduled, Edmondo said carefully. Marcello was occupied with the Santoro operation. I was maintaining continuity with our allies. Continuity or positioning? Vittorio's question cut through the room like a blade. Because from where I sit, it looks like you've been building a parallel power structure. Your own meetings, your own networks, your own authority separate from the boss. Edmondo's expression hardened. With respect, Don Vittorio, I've been serving this family for 8 years. Every decision I've made has strengthened our position. If maintaining relationships with our allies during the boss's absence is considered overreach, it's considered suspicious, Vittorio interrupted. Especially when combined with erratic behavior. You've been pushing boundaries, Edmondo. Making autonomous decisions that should require authorization. It makes people wonder about your loyalties. Marcello remained silent, letting his uncle orchestrate the pressure. Vittorio was doing what Marcello couldn't do directly, raising questions about Edmondo's conduct without making it personal, creating an atmosphere of institutional concern rather than individual vendetta. My loyalty is absolute, Edmondo said, his voice tight. Everything I've done has been for the family's benefit. Then you won't mind submitting to a review of your operations, Vittorio said. It wasn't a question. Full accounting of the dock activities, all meeting notes from your Genovese communications, complete transparency on your network contacts. Standard procedure when concerns are raised. It was a trap, beautifully constructed. If Edmondo refused, he looked guilty. If he agreed, his entire operation would be exposed to scrutiny, including whatever conspiracy he'd been building. Edmondo's eyes cut to Marcello, searching for support or intervention. Marcello met his gaze with perfect neutrality, the expression of a boss allowing his counsel to do their job. Of course, Edmondo said finally. I have nothing to hide. I'll provide complete documentation. Excellent. Vittorio smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We'll begin the review next week. In the meantime, perhaps it's best if you focus on your core responsibilities. Let others handle the external relationships until we've cleared up these concerns. It was a demotion in all but name. Edmondo was being isolated, his authority curtailed, his movements restricted. The capo's jaw clenched, but he nodded. As you wish, Don Vittorio. The meeting continued for another hour, discussing Santoro territory integration and revenue projections, but the real business had been concluded. Vittorio had given Marcello exactly what he needed, institutional justification for scrutinizing Edmondo, without revealing the personal dimension of his betrayal. When the meeting adjourned, Edmondo approached Marcello near the door. Boss, if I could have a word. Not now, Marcello said coolly. I need to get back to Susan. Her migraine, remember. Edmondo's expression flickered frustration, calculation, perhaps the first hint of genuine concern. Of course. But Marcello, the review Vittorio's demanding, there's nothing to find. You know my work is solid. Marcello held his gaze for a long moment. Then you have nothing to worry about. He walked away, leaving Edmondo standing in the villa's great room, surrounded by family members who were already reassessing his power and position. The capo who'd been untouchable 48 hours ago was now vulnerable, questioned, isolated. And he still didn't know why. Marcello climbed into his car where Dante waited. "Vittorio knows something," Marcello said quietly. "He knows everything," Dante replied. "Your uncle's been watching Edmondo for months, waiting to see if the capo would overreach. Today just gave him permission to act." Marcello watched the villa disappear in his rearview mirror. The family was turning against Edmondo organically, sensing weakness and irregularity. When Marcello finally made his move, it wouldn't look like revenge. It would look like institutional necessity. Justice disguised as business. Would Vittorio's strategic pressure be enough for you, or would you demand faster vengeance? Subscribe to see how Marcello's calculated patience pays off. 3 days after the family meeting, Riva brought Marcello the opening he'd been waiting for. She entered his office at the Romano headquarters with a tablet and an expression of grim satisfaction. "Edmondo's nervous," she said, closing the door behind her. "He's been making calls, reaching out to his network, trying to gauge if anyone knows why Vittorio's suddenly scrutinizing him. He's looking for allies." Marcello leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled. "And? He's finding fewer than he expected. Word travels fast in this family. No one wants to attach themselves to someone the Don has questions about." Riva set the tablet on the desk. "But there's one person he's still trusting completely. Carlo Messina." Carlo. Marcello considered the name. A mid-level associate who worked the periphery of both Marcello's operations and Edmondo's network. Useful enough to have access, insignificant enough to be overlooked. The perfect messenger. "Carlo's loyalties?" Marcello asked. "Negotiable," Riva said with a slight smile. "He's ambitious, but pragmatic. Right now he's hedging his bets, maintaining relationships with everyone. But if we make it worth his while, he'll carry whatever message we need." Marcello stood, moving to the window overlooking the city. 5 days since Susan's world had shattered. 5 days of careful patience, strategic positioning, laying groundwork. Every instinct screamed to find Edmondo and end him immediately, but Susan's voice echoed in his mind. "Make sure you destroy him completely." That required precision. "Bring Carlo to me," Marcello said. "Tonight, use the back entrance. Make sure no one sees him arrive." Carlo Messina arrived at 11 p.m., ushered through the private entrance by Dante's considerable bulk. The associate was in his 40s, well-dressed, but not ostentatious, with the careful neutrality of someone who'd learned to survive by being useful to everyone and threatening to no one. He looked nervous when Dante deposited him in Marcello's office. "Mr. Messina." Marcello didn't rise from behind his desk. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." "Of course, boss." Carlo's eyes darted around the room, landing everywhere except on Marcello's face. "Though I admit I'm not sure why I'm here." "Because you're in a unique position," Marcello said quietly. "You work with multiple factions in our family. You have Edmondo's trust. And right now, I need someone who can deliver a message without raising suspicion." Carlo's throat worked as he swallowed. "What kind of message?" "The kind that stays between us." Marcello opened a drawer and removed an envelope, setting it on the desk. "There's $50,000 in there. Consider it a retainer for your discretion and service." Carlo stared at the envelope like it might explode. 50,000 was more than he made in 6 months of legitimate work. "What do I have to do?" "Tomorrow, you're going to have a conversation with Edmondo," Marcello said. "You're going to tell him that you've heard something. A rumor from your contacts in the Genovese family. Something sensitive." "What rumor?" Marcello leaned forward. "That there's a secret trade happening. High level, extremely confidential. The Genovese family has acquired something valuable, information about a federal investigation into our operations. They're willing to sell it, but only to someone they trust. Someone who's been their primary contact." Carlo's eyes widened. "Edmondo." "Exactly. You're going to tell Edmondo that the Genovese reached out to you because they couldn't risk direct communication, that they want to meet with him personally to exchange the information for payment. Tomorrow night, 11 p.m. at the old Warehouse 9 on the East Docks." "But," Carlo hesitated. "Is this real? Is there actually an investigation? Does it matter?" Marcello's voice was cold. "What matters is that Edmondo will believe it's real. He's been cultivating the Genovese relationship. He'll think they're coming to him because they trust him more than they trust me. It feeds his ego and his paranoia. Carlo processed this, understanding dawning in his expression. You want to isolate him. I want him at that warehouse, alone, believing he's protecting the family's interests by handling this himself. Marcello stood. Can you deliver that message convincingly? What happens to him at the warehouse? Carlo asked, then immediately looked like he regretted the question. That's not your concern, Marcello said. Your concern is delivering the message, collecting your payment, and forgetting this conversation ever happened. Can you do that? Carlo looked at the envelope, then at Marcello, then back at the envelope. The calculation was visible on his face: $50,000 for one conversation, or the alternative of refusing a direct order from the boss. Yes, he said finally. I can do that. Good. Marcello moved around the desk, placing a hand on Carlo's shoulder. The gesture was almost friendly, but there was steel underneath. Deliver the message tomorrow afternoon. Make it casual, like you're doing him a favor by bringing him valuable intelligence. Don't oversell it. Edmondo's smart. If you seem too eager, he'll smell the trap. Casual. Got it. Carlo picked up the envelope with trembling hands. And Carlo? Marcello's voice dropped. If Edmondo suspects anything, if he doesn't show up at that warehouse, I'll know the message wasn't delivered correctly. Do you understand what that means? Carlo's face went pale. I understand, boss. Excellent. Dante will show you out. After Carlo left, Riva emerged from the adjacent room where she'd been listening. You think he'll do it? He's too greedy and too terrified to do anything else, Marcello said. By this time tomorrow, Edmondo will have the bait. Now we see if he takes it. The next day crawled by with excruciating slowness. Marcello maintained his normal schedule: meetings about territory integration, discussions about revenue streams, the mundane machinery of running a criminal empire. But his mind was elsewhere, tracking the hours until Carlo would make contact with Edmondo. At 4 p.m., Riva sent a one-word text: delivered. At 5:30, her surveillance team confirmed that Edmondo had made 3 phone calls after Carlo's visit, presumably trying to verify the information through his Genovese contacts. The calls had gone to voicemail because Riva had already reached out to those contacts with a different message: maintain radio silence for the next 24 hours, courtesy of the boss. Edmondo was operating blind, unable to confirm or deny the intelligence, forced to make a decision based on incomplete information. At 8 p.m., Dante reported movement. Edmondo left his apartment. He's heading toward the docks. Alone. Marcello felt something cold and final settle in his chest. He took the bait. Looks like it. He's being careful, took a route designed to detect surveillance, switched cars twice. But he's going to Warehouse 9. Good. Marcello stood from his desk, buttoning his suit jacket. Time to go fishing. Susan was waiting in the penthouse when Marcello stopped there on his way to the docks. She'd insisted on being present for this moment, on knowing when it was happening. She wore black, fitted pants, a simple sweater, her hair pulled back severely. She looked like she was dressed for a funeral. It's tonight, Marcello said. It wasn't a question. Susan nodded. He's going to the warehouse? Should be there in 40 minutes. Marcello checked his watch. I'm leaving in 10. Susan crossed the room to him, and for the first time since that terrible night, she reached for him first. Her hands settled on his chest, feeling his heartbeat through the expensive fabric of his shirt. What are you going to do to him? She asked quietly. Marcello covered her hands with his own. What needs to be done? Will it be enough? Her eyes searched his face. Will it fix what he broke? No, Marcello said honestly. Nothing can fix what he broke. But it will prove that his calculation was wrong. That you weren't worth less than his ambition. That touching you carried a price he couldn't afford to pay. Susan nodded slowly, then rose on her toes and kissed him. It was soft, sad, and tasted like goodbye to something that had existed before. Come back to me, she whispered against his lips. Always, Marcello promised. He left her standing in the penthouse, surrounded by all the luxury and protection that had failed to keep her safe, and headed toward the warehouse where Edmondo Giordano would learn exactly what promises Marcello Romano actually kept. The trap was set. The prey was coming. Now came the reckoning. Marcello sat in the dim penthouse, the city lights sprawling beneath him like a kingdom he no longer cared about. In 1 hour, he would drive to Warehouse 9. In 90 minutes, Edmondo Giordano would arrive at what he thought was a clandestine meeting. In 2 hours, one of them would be dead. The mathematics of violence were simple. The emotional calculus was infinitely more complex. Susan emerged from the bedroom wearing the black outfit she'd chosen like armor. Her face was composed, but Marcello saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers twisted together before she forced them still. She'd been preparing for this moment as much as he had, in her own way. "You should eat something," she said, gesturing to the untouched dinner the chef had prepared hours ago. "You haven't eaten since breakfast." "Neither have you." "I can't." Susan moved to the windows, her reflection ghostly in the glass. "Every time I try, I remember him sitting on that sofa, drinking your wine, talking about appreciation and waste," and her voice caught. "I can't." Marcello rose and crossed to her, stopping just behind her but not touching, giving her the choice. Susan leaned back against him, and he wrapped his arms around her waist, holding her like she might disappear. "I keep thinking about what happens after tonight," she said quietly. "If you kill him, the family will have questions. There'll be investigations, power struggles, people choosing sides. Your uncle might support you, or he might decide you've become unstable. Everything you've built could collapse." "I know. And if something goes wrong, if Edmondo's prepared for this somehow, if he's better at violence than you are," Susan turned in his arms, her hands gripping his shirt. "You might not come back. This could be the last time we, Susan." Marcello cupped her face in his hands. "Look at me." She did, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I've spent my entire adult life building power," Marcello said. "Territory, wealth, influence, respect. I told myself it was empire, but really it was just collection. Accumulation. Things I could control and possess and protect." His thumbs brushed her cheekbones. "Then I met you, and for the first time I had something that mattered more than the empire. Something that made all that power feel hollow if I couldn't keep you safe." "But you couldn't," Susan whispered. "That's what we learned. Your power couldn't protect me from the poison inside it." "No, it couldn't." Marcello's voice was raw. "I surrounded you with walls and guards and codes, but I never imagined the threat would come from inside. That my trust would be the weapon used against you. That's my failure, Kara. Not the empire's. Mine." Susan's tears spilled over. "So, what are you going to do? Destroy everyone you've ever trusted? Tear down everything you've built because one man betrayed you?" "No." Marcello pulled her closer. "I'm going to destroy the one man who proved that my world is incompatible with your safety. And then I'm going to make a choice I should have made 6 months ago." "What choice?" "The empire or you," Marcello said simply. "I can't have both." "Not really. Every day I spend building power, consolidating territory, managing the family's business is a day you spend locked in this gilded cage waiting for the next Edmondo to appear. The next ambitious lieutenant who thinks you're a weakness to exploit. The next threat I can't see coming because I'm too busy being the boss." Susan stared at him. "You're not making sense. You can't just walk away from the Romano family. That's not how this works." "I can make it work." Marcello's voice was absolute. "After tonight, after Edmondo's gone, I'm going to tell Vittorio the truth. All of it. What Edmondo did, why he had to die, and why I can't be the boss anymore. I'll recommend successors, ensure stability, arrange our exit. It might take months, maybe a year, but I'll extract us." "And go where?" Susan asked. "Do what?" "Marcello, you're this world. Without it, who are you?" "I don't know," Marcello admitted. "Maybe nobody. Maybe just a man who failed to protect the one thing he loved and spent the rest of his life trying to make up for it." He pressed his forehead to hers. "But I know who I am right now in this moment. I'm the man who has to choose between keeping his empire and keeping his soul. And Susan, you're my soul." The confession hung in the air between them, too big and too true to take back. "You don't have to do this for me," Susan said, but her voice wavered. "Yes, I do. Because if I don't, if I kill Edmondo and then go right back to being the boss, surrounding you with new guards and new promises and new illusions of safety, we'll both be living a lie. You'll never trust it. Never trust me. You'll spend every day waiting for the next betrayal, and I'll spend every day knowing I chose power over your peace. Susan pulled back enough to really look at him. What if I don't want you to give it up? What if I want you to stay, to fight, to prove that we can have both? Can we? Marcello challenged gently. Be honest, Cara. After what Edmondo did, after seeing how easily your protection was violated, can you really imagine a future where you feel safe in my world? Susan opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. The truth was in her silence. I didn't think so, Marcello said softly. So tonight isn't just about killing Edmondo, Susan realized. It's about ending everything. The life we planned, the future you promised, all of it. No. Marcello's grip on her tightened. It's about beginning something new. Something real. Not a boss and his protected virgin, but two people who survived something terrible and chose each other anyway. No empire. No guards. No penthouse prison. Just us. That's terrifying, Susan whispered. I know. We might fail. We might destroy each other trying to be normal people. I know that too. Susan searched his face, looking for doubt or hesitation. She found only certainty, the same absolute conviction that had made Marcello Romano a feared boss, now redirected toward a single purpose. Promise me something, she said finally. Anything. When you face Edmondo tonight, don't make it about revenge. Don't make it about wounded pride or violated honor, or any of the things your world values. Susan's hands framed his face. Make it about justice. About drawing a line that says what he did was unforgivable and the price is absolute. Not because you're the powerful boss, but because you're the man who loves me. Marcello kissed her then, pouring everything he couldn't say into the connection. Fear and fury and desperate love, all tangled together in the kiss of a man about to walk into violence. When they finally separated, Susan walked to the bedroom and returned with something small and silver, a St. Christopher medal on a thin chain. Her grandmother's, she'd told him once. The only thing she had from her family. Wear this, she said, fastening it around his neck. So part of me is with you. Marcello looked down at the medal resting against his chest. I'm not sure a saint can help with what I'm about to do. He's the patron saint of travelers, Susan said. And you're traveling somewhere dark tonight. You'll need all the help you can get to find your way back. Marcello pulled her into his arms one final time, breathing in her scent, memorizing the feeling of her against him. In an hour, everything would change. He'd either return to her as a man who'd chosen love over empire, or he wouldn't return at all. I love you, he said against her hair. Whatever happens tonight, whatever comes after, I need you to know that. Everything I'm about to do is because I love you more than power, more than legacy, more than my own life. I know, Susan whispered. I've always known. That's what made Edmondo's betrayal so devastating. It proved that love wasn't enough to protect me. Then tonight I proved something else, Marcello said. That love is enough to destroy anyone who tries to take you from me. He released her, stepping back before his resolve could crack. Susan stood in the center of the penthouse, surrounded by luxury that meant nothing, her hand pressed to her chest where her heart was breaking and healing simultaneously. Come back to me, she said again. Marcello nodded once, then turned and walked out of the penthouse. Dante waited by the elevator, his massive frame a silent question. It's time, Marcello said. They descended in silence, dropping through the levels of the building like stones through water, down to the garage where Luca had prepared an unmarked sedan. No security detail. No backup. Just Marcello, Dante, and the tools of violence waiting in the trunk. As they pulled into the night, Marcello touched the St. Christopher medal beneath his shirt. Patron saint of travelers. He was traveling toward the darkness tonight, but with Susan's faith pressed against his heart, he had a reason to find his way back. Warehouse 9 crouched at the edge of the East Docks like a forgotten monument to industrial decay. The building had been abandoned for a decade, its windows shattered, its walls tagged with graffiti that nobody bothered to read. The Romano family owned it through a shell corporation, kept it empty for exactly this kind of occasion, when business needed to be conducted away from witnesses and security cameras. Marcello arrived 20 minutes early. Dante parked the sedan in the shadows 2 blocks away, engine idling, ready for a quick exit if necessary. Marcello checked the Beretta tucked against his spine, then the knife strapped to his ankle. Tools of his trade, familiar as breathing. "You want me inside?" Dante asked, his scarred face impassive. "No. This is between him and me." Marcello opened the car door. "If I'm not out in 30 minutes, call Riva. She'll know what to do. And if Edmondo walks out instead of you?" Marcello's expression was cold. "He won't." He crossed the empty street and slipped through a side entrance Luca had left unlocked earlier. The warehouse interior was vast and hollow, moonlight streaming through broken skylights to illuminate rusted machinery and oil-stained concrete. The air smelled of decay and seawater and old violence. Marcello positioned himself in the center of the space, beneath the brightest shaft of moonlight, and waited. Edmondo arrived exactly on time. Marcello heard the front door creak open, footsteps echoing in the emptiness. The capo moved cautiously, one hand inside his jacket where a weapon undoubtedly waited. He scanned the darkness, searching for the Genovese representatives he'd been promised. Instead, he found Marcello. Edmondo stopped 30 feet away, his weathered face shifting through confusion to understanding to carefully controlled alarm. His hand stayed inside his jacket. "Boss," Edmondo said carefully. "I wasn't expecting you." Carlo said the Genovese wanted to meet about sensitive information. Carlo delivered the message I paid him to deliver, Marcello replied, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "There are no Genovese representatives, Edmondo. No federal investigation. No secret trade. Just you and me and a conversation we should have had 5 days ago." Edmondo's expression hardened. His hand emerged from his jacket empty, a calculated gesture of non-aggression. "I see. A trap, then. Should I be flattered you went to such elaborate lengths? You should be terrified. Should I?" Edmondo took a step forward, and despite the danger, there was confidence in his movement. "Mark, if this is about business, about Vittorio's concerns with my operations, we can discuss it. I've been with you for 8 years. Whatever irregularities he's found, there are explanations. This isn't about business." "Then what?" Edmondo spread his hands. "What's worth luring me to an abandoned warehouse at midnight like we're characters in a bad gangster film?" Marcello's control cracked just enough to let fury bleed through. "Susan." The name landed like a gunshot. Edmondo's carefully maintained composure flickered, just for a second, but it was enough. Guilt and calculation flashed across his face before the professional mask returned. Edmondo's voice went quiet. "She told you. Every detail." Marcello took a step forward. "How you arrived at my penthouse with false concern. How you exploited my absence, my trust, my promise to protect her. How you violated the one sacred thing in my world and then walked out whistling like you'd completed a successful transaction." Edmondo's jaw tightened. "And now you want what? Revenge? Justice? To salvage your wounded pride by killing the man who touched your possession." "She's not a possession." "Isn't she?" Edmondo's confidence was returning, fed by desperation. "Mark, let's be honest. You kept that girl locked in a tower like a fairy tale princess. You controlled every aspect of her life, surrounded her with guards and rules and restrictions. You collected her like you collect everything else, territory, money, power. Don't pretend what I did was about her. It was about you." Marcello's hand moved toward the Beretta, but he forced it still. "Explain that logic to me. How violating Susan was actually about me." "Because you needed to learn the limits of your control," Edmondo said, and there was genuine conviction in his voice now. "You needed to understand that you can't protect everything, can't dominate every variable. That even the mighty Marcello Romano has vulnerabilities." He took another step closer. "I did you a favor, Mark. I showed you the truth before some rival family used Susan to destroy you." The rationalization was breathtaking in its audacity. "A favor," Marcello repeated softly. "You destroyed the woman I love and called it a favor." "I broke your illusion," Edmondo corrected. "The fantasy that you could keep her safe and pure while building an empire on blood. She was always going to be collateral damage, Mark. I just accelerated the timeline." Marcello pulled the Beretta, the movement fluid and final. Edmondo's hand went back toward his jacket, but he was too slow. Marcello's weapon was already trained on his chest. "Don't," Marcello said quietly. Edmondo froze, calculating odds. "You're really going to kill me? Your most trusted capo? The man who's helped you build half your empire? Do you understand what that does to the family's stability?" "I understand exactly what it does." Marcello's aim never wavered. "It sends a message that Susan Reyes is worth more than territory, more than stability, more than any strategic consideration. That touching her carries a price no position can protect you from." "The family won't accept it," Edmondo said desperately. "Vittorio, the council, they'll demand explanations. When they find out you killed me over a woman, over personal grievance instead of business necessity, they'll question your judgment. Your authority. Everything you've built will crack. Let it crack." Marcello's voice was absolute. "I choose her over all of it. Over you, over the family, over the empire." "That's what you miscalculated, Edmondo. You thought she was my weakness. She's actually my strength. The only thing clear enough to show me what really matters." Edmondo's face paled as he finally understood. "You're walking away. After tonight, you're leaving the family. Eventually. But first, I'm removing the poison." Marcello's finger moved to the trigger. "Any last words? Final justifications for why you thought you could touch what's mine and survive?" "She'll never forgive you for this," Edmondo said, his voice shaking now. "You think killing me makes you a hero? You're just proving you're exactly what I said, a man who solves everything with violence." "She'll look at you and see a murderer, not a protector." "Maybe," Marcello acknowledged. "But she'll see a murderer who chose her over everything else. Who drew a line and enforced it absolutely. Who proved that love, in my world, means destroying anyone who threatens it." Edmondo reached for his weapon then, a last desperate gamble. His hand cleared his jacket, metal glinting in the moonlight. Marcello fired twice. The shots echoed through the warehouse like thunder, then faded into ringing silence. Edmondo staggered backward, looking down at the spreading red on his chest with something like surprise. He opened his mouth, but only blood came out. "You were right about one thing," Marcello said, lowering the Beretta. "I do control through violence. I am exactly what you said. But the difference between us is that I used that violence to protect what I love. You used it to destroy." Edmondo collapsed his knees, then forward onto the oil-stained concrete. His breathing was labored, wet, failing. Marcello approached and crouched beside him. "I want you to understand something in your final moments. This isn't about business or territory or power. This is about Susan. Every breath you stole from her peace of mind, I'm taking from you now. Every moment of fear you caused her, you're feeling tenfold. Justice isn't clean, Edmondo. It's absolute." The light faded from Edmondo's eyes. His breathing stopped. Marcello stood, looking down at the body of the man who'd been his right hand for 8 years. He felt no satisfaction, no triumph. Just cold finality. A problem solved with the tools he knew best. He pulled out his phone and called Dante. "It's done. Bring the car." Then he called Riva. "Warehouse 9. I need a cleanup crew and a story." Edmondo tried to sell family secrets to the Genovese. "We have evidence." He resisted when confronted. "Make it convincing." Finally, he called Vittorio. "Uncle, I need to see you tomorrow. Private. There are things you need to know about Edmondo, about me, about the future of this family." He stood in the warehouse for another minute, the St. Christopher medal heavy against his chest. Susan had asked him to make it about justice, not revenge. He hoped she could tell the difference when he returned to her. Marcello walked out of Warehouse 9, leaving Edmondo's body behind, along with any illusion that he could have both the empire and the woman he loved. He'd made his choice. Now he had to live with it. Was Marcello's choice justice, or just revenge dressed in love's clothing? Subscribe to discover if Susan can accept what he's become. Marcello returned to the penthouse at 3 in the morning. He'd stopped at his safe house to clean up, but there was only so much soap and water could accomplish. His white shirt was gone, replaced by a black t-shirt Dante had found. His hands were scrubbed raw, but still carried the memory of gunpowder and blood. There was a gash along his ribs where Edmondo's bullet had grazed him before Marcello's shots found their mark, stitched hastily by Luca, wrapped in gauze that was already seeping red. Susan was awake when he entered. She sat on the ivory sofa, the same sofa where this had all begun, wearing his shirt like she had that terrible first night. Her eyes tracked his movements as he locked the door, as he crossed the marble floor, as he stopped 10 feet away because he didn't know if she wanted him closer. "It's done," Marcello said quietly. Susan's gaze moved over him, cataloging damage. The blood seeping through his shirt. The bruise forming along his jaw where Edmondo had landed one desperate punch. The hollowness in his eyes that came from crossing a line you couldn't uncross. "You're hurt." Her voice was steady, clinical. "It's nothing." Luca stitched it. "Let me see." It wasn't a request. Susan stood and crossed to him, her fingers already reaching for the hem of his shirt. Marcello let her lift it, revealing the white gauze wrapped around his torso, the red bloom spreading across it like a fatal flower. "This needs to be redone," Susan said. "Sit down." Marcello sank onto the sofa while Susan disappeared into the bathroom. She returned with the first aid kit they kept stocked for exactly these occasions, because in his world, violence was an occupational hazard and wounds were just another form of business expense. She worked in silence, carefully unwrapping Luca's hasty work. The gash was angry and raw, the stitches already pulling. Susan cleaned it with antiseptic that made Marcello's jaw clench, then wrapped fresh gauze with practiced efficiency. "You've done this before," Marcello observed. "I've watched you come home bleeding a dozen times," Susan replied. "I learned." She finished securing the gauze and sat back. "Is he dead?" "Yes." "Did he suffer?" Marcello met her eyes, searching for what answer she needed. "Not as much as he deserved. It was quick. 2 shots. He died knowing why." Susan nodded slowly, processing. "Did he fight back?" "He tried. Got 1 shot off before Marcello gestured to his ribs. "Before it was over." "Good." The word came out fierce, unexpected. "I'm glad he fought. Glad it wasn't easy. Glad you have scars to remember him by." Marcello stared at her. This wasn't the response he'd anticipated. He'd expected horror, revulsion, maybe relief. Not this cold satisfaction that Edmondo's death had cost something. "Susan, don't." She stood abruptly, pacing to the windows. "Don't apologize. Don't explain. Don't try to make it gentler than it was. You killed him. You went to that warehouse and you executed the man who violated me, and I need you to understand something." She turned to face him. "I'm glad. I'm glad he's dead. I'm glad you chose me over everything else. And that terrifies me because I don't know what that makes me." Marcello rose carefully, his ribs protesting. "It makes you human. It makes you someone who wanted justice." "Justice." Susan laughed bitterly. "Is that what we're calling it? Murder in an abandoned warehouse sounds more like revenge. Maybe it's both." Marcello approached slowly, giving her space to retreat if she needed it. "Maybe in my world, they're the same thing. Justice is just revenge with institutional approval." "And did you get approval?" Susan asked. "Or did you go rogue, throw away everything you've built for?" Her voice cracked. "For me." "For you," Marcello confirmed. "Absolutely, completely, without hesitation or regret. I chose you, Susan. Over the empire, over the family's stability, over 8 years of trust and partnership with Edmondo. I chose you." Tears spilled down Susan's cheeks. "Why? Why would you destroy everything for someone who couldn't even protect herself? Who let him in, believed his lies, became the weakness he exploited?" "Because you're not a weakness." Marcello closed the distance between them, cupping her face in his hands. "You're the only real thing in my life. Everything else, the power, the territory, the respect, it's all illusion. Smoke and mirrors and violence pretending to be permanence. But you, Kara, you're real. Your pain is real. Your trauma is real. And my love for you is the only true thing I've ever felt." Susan's hands gripped his wrists. "What happens now?" "The family will find out. They'll ask questions." "Your uncle, the council, I told Vittorio the truth," Marcello said. "Called him from the warehouse. Told him everything, what Edmondo did, why he had to die, that I'm prepared to face whatever consequences come from it. And he said we'd talk tomorrow. That he'd handle the immediate fallout, create a story about Edmondo selling secrets. But Susan, he knows. He knows this was personal, not business. That changes things. Susan pulled back, searching his face. Changes them how? Marcello took a breath, feeling the stitches pull. I told him I'm stepping down. Not immediately, that would destabilize everything. But over the next year, I'll transition power, ensure stability, arrange our exit from this life. The words hung between them like a bomb waiting to detonate. You're leaving the family, Susan whispered. You're actually walking away from everything you've built. I can't have both, Marcello said simply. I learned that when I walked into this penthouse 5 days ago and found you destroyed by my own capo. The empire and your safety are mutually exclusive. So I choose you. What if I don't want you to? Susan's voice trembled. What if I can't live with the guilt of knowing you gave up everything for me? Then we'll carry that guilt together. Marcello pulled her against him, ignoring the pain in his ribs. But Susan, I need you to understand, this isn't sacrifice. This is survival. Without you, the empire means nothing. It's just violence and money and power that doesn't fill the void. You fill it. You make me something more than a boss. You make me human. Susan buried her face against his chest, her tears soaking through his shirt. I don't know how to do this. How to love someone who kills for me. How to accept that your violence is somehow proof of devotion. Neither do I, Marcello admitted. But we'll figure it out. Together. No more illusions about what I am or what my world requires. No more pretending you can be protected from darkness while living inside it. Just truth, Kara. Painful, ugly, absolute truth. Susan pulled back enough to look at him. Her eyes were red, her face streaked with tears, but there was something new there, determination, maybe. Or acceptance of the terrible reality they'd been thrust into. I need to know something, she said. When you killed Edmondo, when you pulled that trigger, who were you? The mafia boss enforcing his dominance, or the man who loves me? Marcello considered lying, softening it. But they'd promised truth. Both, he said. I was both. The boss who couldn't let betrayal stand, and the man who'd burn the world down for you. I can't separate them, Susan. They're woven together. My love for you is violent because I'm violent. It's possessive because I'm possessive. It's absolute because I don't know how to be anything less. Susan nodded slowly, absorbing this. Then I need to be honest too. Part of me is horrified by what you did. By the ease with which you killed him, the coldness in your voice when you called Vittorio. But another part, she took a shaking breath. Another part feels safer than I have in 5 days. Because I know now. I know exactly what you're capable of, exactly how far you'll go. There's no uncertainty anymore. Is that enough? Marcello asked. Knowing I'm a killer who chose you? I don't know, Susan said honestly. Ask me again in a month, in a year, when we're trying to build something normal from these broken pieces. But right now, tonight, it's enough that you came back. That you kept your promise. Marcello kissed her then, and it was different from before. Not the passionate possession of a boss claiming his woman, but something rawer, more desperate. Two damaged people clinging to each other in the wreckage of everything they'd thought they knew about love and safety. When they finally separated, Susan took his hand and led him to the bedroom. They lay down together fully clothed, Marcello on his back to protect his injured ribs, Susan curled against his side with her head on his shoulder. Tell me about the future, she whispered. The one where we're not in this penthouse, where you're not the boss. What does it look like? Marcello stroked her hair, staring at the ceiling. Small. Quiet. Maybe a house somewhere ordinary, where nobody knows our names. You could open that bookstore you talked about once. I'd have to find work, something legitimate, though I'm not sure what skills a retired mafia boss brings to the civilian world. Susan smiled against his chest. You're organized. Strategic. Good with people when you're not threatening them. So corporate management? God, no. You'd terrify the other executives. Susan's smile faded. Will they let you go? The family? Eventually. With the right transitions, the right assurances. Vittorio understands. He's old enough to remember what this life costs. He won't fight me. And if others do, then I'll handle it. Marcello's voice hardened. I've made my choice, Susan. Whatever it takes to get us out, I'll do it. They lay in silence, listening to the city beyond the windows. Somewhere out there, Riva was cleaning up the evidence of Edmondo's death. Dante was creating alibis. The Romano family machine was grinding forward, absorbing the shock of a capo's betrayal and death. But in the penthouse, in the quiet darkness, two people were building something fragile and new from the wreckage of broken promises. "I love you," Susan whispered. "Even though I don't fully understand what that means anymore. Even though loving you means accepting darkness. I love you." "I love you too," Marcello replied. "Enough to leave everything behind. Enough to become someone new. Enough to spend the rest of my life proving that choosing you was the only right decision I've ever made." Outside, dawn was beginning to break over the city. In a few hours, Marcello would meet with Vittorio and begin the complex process of disentangling himself from the empire. There would be negotiations, transitions, probably threats and violence before it was all over. But for now, in this moment, Marcello Romano held Susan Reyes and felt something he'd never experienced in 20 years of building power: peace. The kind that came from knowing exactly who you were and what you'd sacrificed for love. The dangerous, terrible, beautiful kind of peace that could only be built on blood and absolute devotion. Thanks for listening to this story. Please subscribe and click the video on the left side of your screen. It's even more interesting than the one you just listened to.